Won't you lend your lungs to me? Mine are collapsing. Plant my feet and bitterly breathe up the time that's passed. Breath I'll take and breath I'll give. Pray the day's not poised. Stand among the ones that live in lonely indecision.
Welcome to a special episode of the Crackpot Podcast with LaFond and Lockhart. Today we have a special guest, Baruch, who's joining us from Israel. And we're going to talk about Baruch's background and his experiences in the military and all kinds of other interesting stuff. Welcome, Baruch.
Hi.
Hey, thanks for calling, Baruch.
Thanks for having me, guys.
We were, before Lynn started to record, we were speaking about Baruch's new life as a boxer. I think the only intellectual in the boxing gym, is it?
No, I don't know about all that. I don't know about the only intellectual. I'm the only guy, except for the coach, who's a classic Russian boxing coach. He's like maybe 65, 70, this little old skinny guy. And the kid with glasses that they all call the professor, I'm the only dude in there without jail time, I think. I wouldn't say I'm the only intellectual because they're all in the middle of training talking about cryptocurrencies and whatnot.
Oh.
You know, so I don't know.
Right.
It's Russians, you know. Yeah.
So the IQ is probably a little bit higher in a Russian-Israeli boxing gym than in a Baltimore City boxing gym. So that makes sense.
Man, I don't know. Where's that guy? Ed Lattimore. Where's he from?
Oh, I don't know. There's usually one really smart guy in every boxing gym. I mean, that's not unusual. It's not a bunch of dummies.
You got that one guy, Oliver.
Yeah. And there's at least one guy that reads a whole lot and usually loans out books to the other guys. So it's an interesting thing to go in the boxing gym. Sometimes you have guys that end up learning how to read and write at a boxing gym, you know, because they didn't pick it up in the hellish schools.
Yeah, of course.
Well,
I mean, you gotta. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I just wanted to introduce you to the readers. Baruch is and listeners. Baruch, you've been reading. Tell us how long you've been reading James LaFond.
Oh man, it's 2017 now, so probably since 2000 and about 3 years now, something like that.
Okay.
3 years. 3 years.
Okay.
What was that one? I'll tell you how long it's been. I remember you had that one with the what was that book you're publishing on the site in installments where you had it was like the Pilgrims and the Indians and a bunch of, I couldn't figure out, it was like a bunch of vampire squid things or something like that in New England.
Heimivore.
Yeah.
Heimivore.
Yes. Well, you found me through Heimivore. Wow, that's great.
No. No, I haven't found you through. No, it's just that's the thing I remember was coming up on the site when I think somebody told me, listen, there's this guy that like lives in Baltimore and doing some kind of menial labor job thing for decades, and he's a boxer and he taught himself how do you pronounce it? Koine? Ancient Greek, you know, to translate a bunch of source texts about. And I said, okay, you know, well, let me read it, you know, and that's how I came to the site.
Oh, cool. Well, I was as far as the Greek goes, I was an ape with a huge Littleton Scott Greek English lexicon where they give you the spellings in 5 dialects. Yeah. So
I only learned that
coursework
about you, James, in the last couple months when you did Grace Speaker. I didn't know that, so that's funny that other people know that sooner. That's like the first.
Well, one of the first things that Charles put up was the ancient boxing stuff.
Oh yeah. Baruch, tell us, you've told me a little bit about your background. You were born in Russia, and you lived in the United States, and now you live in Israel. Can you tell us a little bit your story?
Yeah. Well, it's it doesn't really have a cohesive flow to it very much. I was born in Russia, and we came to the States when I was maybe about 6. And 6, yeah. I grew up in New York. I graduated high school, went to college, got kicked out of college for just refusing to study. just shithead stuff, basically. And joined the Army. That's that was kind of. I didn't really want to see. I really didn't want to do kind of menial labor, and there wasn't really a whole lot of other stuff available. And the Army was kind of the only thing I'd seen until then that really kind of at least had the promise of something a little more meaningful. Did that for about 8 years.
Did you join before or after 9/11?
It's funny you should ask. I joined the reserves back in 2000. I was still in college. And then after 9/11, I went on active duty. Now, I had to jump through all kinds of crazy hoops to do this and play all sorts of catch-22 shenanigans with the bureaucracy. But, it took like a lot of doing. But, I went active duty after 9/11. And, the only thing that was going on back then was Afghanistan, and Afghanistan was sort of what it was for several years. It was kind of like a big game hunting preserve for special operations and that kind of thing. There were some conventional units in there, but mostly it was very hit or miss. And so I said, okay, let's learn an Afghan language. I finagled my way into becoming a linguist and learned Uzbek, which of all the Afghan languages, I'd heard the nicest things about the speakers of Uzbek. So I went and learned that for a year, and then got into basically tactical signals intelligence in a special operations unit. And they did not send me to Afghanistan once. I went to Iraq twice. I was the only guy that didn't speak Arabic on my team. And then after the Army, after college, I finagled my way again into going to Afghanistan as a contractor, with a guy called Tim Lynch. I think you guys would actually like his site. It's called Free Range International, and I've been reading his site. How he was doing all this outside the wire stuff and just wearing local clothes, living with the Afghans, and just kind of getting by in all these places that the military would go, like 3-4 gun trucks deep. And, for them, it was Indian country. And this guy was just living out there. And I was reading this stuff, when I was in Iraq on my first deployment and then onwards. And when I wrapped up my bachelor's, which was in Near Eastern languages, meaning Persian and Uzbek, basically, I reached out to him and said, hey, man, can you guys use me? I would love to go over there. And things came together. I went over there and did that for I was wrapping up. Another guy had left, and so I stepped into the middle of the contract and did about 4 months. And I was kind of becoming religious by the time I got there. And what I saw there really made me kind of go, listen, I can't do like the expat contractor thing, and I really can't go back to the States and live there. So I, in Judaism, it's called making tshuva. When you're not religious and then you become religious, you start observing the commandments. And went back to the States, was doing that, and immediately realized I can't do this in the States either, really. So I went to Israel, and I live here in Israel now. I live in the settlements in the Samarian Highlands, in a place that's got about, I think we got like 15 families now up on the mountain. When I came here, got married, had some kids, and live here with my wife, kids, animals. Yeah.
You gave some good dog advice.
In a nutshell. Yeah, I got 2 dogs, and now we got a cat, which the dogs have somehow not killed yet, which is incredible. This cat is basically the James LaFond of my neighborhood. The large white dog. I explained to her, like, this is our cat. It's absolutely forbidden to touch it, because the first one I got, I didn't. The dog was under the house when I got the cat, and I came out an hour later. My 3-year-old son had basically fed the cat to the dog. The cat was dead. Oh. So this one, I made a point of bringing the cat to the dog, showing the cat to the dog, and explaining it. So she's fine. But the black dog, I don't want to make another James LaFond analogy here, but the black dog is basically every day I see this on my porch. The cat walks along, the dog's stalking it, and then the cat turns around and like chases down the dog. It's basically a James LaFond story. It was like in the animal kingdom. The cat like puffs up on the dog. The dog like thinks twice about it and like kind of stalks off. And the cat goes back to the balcony. That's the animal side of things.
Oh, that's great. You got to give that cat a cane when it gets older.
He doesn't need a cane, man. He's
claws, right?
His claws got teeth. He looks completely feral. I think he's hybridized with some kind of local wildcat.
Oh, nice.
Here in Israel, it's, by the way, because this is like the logic of Israel, which is that it's not that there's no logic, there's anti-logic. Everywhere's overrun by stray cats, but you're not allowed to shoot them or hurt them in any way, even if they're coming into your backyard. And, you're not allowed because they've hybridized with the local wildcat population, and so therefore they've become they've converted to a protected species.
Yeah.
Do you have a similar situation with feral dogs?
We got a big pack that lives kind of in the hills. I run into them every once in a while. They don't. No, I mean you can. They're not a protected species or anything.
Okay.
But they don't come close. My dog runs them off whenever she sees them. My wife when she was pregnant with the last kid, she would go to the hitchhiking stop / bus stop in the morning, and the dog would walk with her and run the feral dogs off if she saw them.
And that's the white dog, the big white dog?
Yeah.
What kind of breed is that again?
There's different theories out there. She's either a Central Asian or like a Pyrenees sheepdog.
So those things were bred to fight off bears, weren't they?
Those things are bred to fight off anything. They're bred. You see the same kind of dog all over. Like it's called the Great Mountain, right? From it runs from Spain all the way probably to Korea. That big chain of mountains, and all through there you got the same variations on the same kind of dog, and their job is always the same. They hide amongst the sheep. They don't hurt them or anything. They don't care where the sheep go. They just hang out there and they wait for something to come along so they can eat it.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
It's a great job.
Yeah.
That would be. Hey, I have a question. How many years were you in the Special Forces?
I was not in the Special Forces. I was in a Special Operations unit, but I was not a Special Forces guy.
Oh, okay. Okay. Is that like the mixed units that they would put together with Rangers and other Special Ops people?
No. Special Operations units have, I don't, they basically have intelligence detachments that are in there. And so you work together, but it's a different thing. I did that let me think for a second, for about 5.5 years, 6 years.
Okay. Did you like that better than the contracting that you did later? Was there a big difference in the? It was completely night and day because it was completely night and day without getting too much into the specifics. How do I put this? Basically, the Special Operations role in the global war on terror has been more or less finding terrorists and getting them one way or the other, or training up the local counter-terror guys or the local forces and advising them, which is to say, leading them to do the same. And that's a lot of it's like kind of what I think professional sports is supposed to emulate. And it's dangerous enough to be interesting, and most of the time, except for there's of course there were places that I didn't go to, like Fallujah or whatever, which apparently was like something like Stalingrad, I guess, at its height. But the guys you're fighting are they suck enough that you're not really seeing like Vietnam level, like Vietnam era levels of just combat. I don't want to belittle it. It's basically it's just a counterinsurgency. It's not like you're running into like NBA regiments out there. So it's
again, I don't want to belittle it, but I cannot imagine what the guys that went through like Korea or World War II or Vietnam, went through. I don't think, except for maybe a very, very small percentage, I don't think the experience is the same. Even these guys that are out in Afghan outposts, the conventional guys that are getting shot at, every day. But still, it's rare that you see a unit take, massive, massive casualties. It's generally a trickle. I mean a nonstop trickle, but a trickle.
Hey, you said that it's a little bit akin to policing, or at least that policing is taking on more of these counterinsurgency kind of techniques. You told me that. Right.
There's a lot of I guess tactics, techniques, and procedures that you're seeing over there in the States, in places like Detroit and Baltimore that there's a lot of overlap. It trickles down. Whereas the contracting stuff was much more, we were building stuff, and I was the only American in it. We had a team of about probably 20 Afghans that were professionals, engineers, and all kinds of other stuff. And then about 6,000 guys that were out there, on the job site building stuff. And your job would basically be to kind of know what was going on and, make sure everybody got paid and be out there, running around the different job sites and make things work. And so be as low profile as possible, And again, I was living with these guys for months, and it was just a completely different animal. I think, I don't know, looking back at it, in the big picture, they were both kind of pointless, but I feel better about the contracting.
The pictures you sent me, was that from your contracting?
Yeah.
I remember you were standing in a hallway, I guess of a building you were living in or working on with your arm around this smallish guy.
Yeah.
That you seem to be friends with.
Yeah, well, I was friends with everybody, man. That was part of, I don't want to say that was part of the job, but that was part of the job.
Okay. I've read a few memoirs by guys who came back from Afghanistan. There's one ranger, he wrote a book called The Reaper. He had more sniper kills than any other ranger sniper. I think he had like 30 or something like that. And it seemed like what you described, like a big game hunt. And so the whole book really revolved around the only 2 firefights that this guy was involved in. With around 30 kills, he was involved in 2 firefights. And it seems like when there was a firefight, it was regarded as a disaster. Something went wrong. And they weren't supposed to be out there slugging it out. One was on a city street somewhere, and the other one was out near a settlement where they were going to disarm a bomb that was really just bait for them.
Right. Well, you've read a lot about the Indians. You've written a lot about the Indians, and you know that the game there is not, to go and bang it out head to head. That's just stupid. The game is, to do ambushes and raids and all this other stuff, and and especially for the special operations guys, especially for the Rangers, the game for those guys is going out and getting people. The conventional guys, a lot of times they get stuck in some godforsaken outpost, and the local guys, from their perspective, it's like they grew up listening to Dad and Grandpa and all the uncles talking about banging it out with the Soviets, and and like, oh great, this is my chance to prove myself. So they're out there, getting lit up for like just on a daily basis. Somebody will go and take pot shots at them from the mountains, and then maybe once a deployment they'll launch some kind of big attack and try to overrun the place, or maybe not. For us, I think the first trip I was over in Iraq, we were in a really remote area of Iraq that later became sadly famous because the Islamic State took over and massacred a ton of Yazidis there. That was right on the border between the Kurds and the Yazidis specifically, which is a kind of Kurd, a non-Muslim kind of Kurd, right? They got one of these like Middle Eastern mystery religions, kind of like the Druze or whatever.
Really?
Yeah.
Are they not Christians? I thought they were
There's
Christians.
some Jewish Kurds too, right?
No, the Yazidis, they got one of these, it might be, it's one of these mystery religions where even most of them don't really know what it's about or can't talk what it's about. There's people that say they're Satanists. Their theory, what little I got of it was that God and Satan had a falling out, but then God is good and all forgiving, so they made up, and God put Satan in charge of the planet. Yeah,
that's different.
Well, I mean, who knows? That's the version I got. Really nice people, much nicer than their neighbors, the Arabs. Mm. So I was there, in 2007 when, and we were in this little outpost. It was us and it was probably about like 20 Americans and a couple of hundred Iraqis, and right on more or less on the Syrian border. And we didn't really, nobody. We'd go out and do our thing, but nobody really tried to come for us. It was just, basically Indian warfare, I guess, in a way. They did blow up a Yazidi town and killed, I think, several thousand of them. They drove a bunch of dump trucks in there and nuked the place. Basically, all these mud buildings just collapsed on the inhabitants.
Who did that?
That was in August of 2007. The Islamic State, back then they were called it was right. They transitioned from Al Qaeda in Iraq to the Islamic State something or other. It was it's like Microsoft. You have like different software versions every month.
Yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, I guess what I'm saying is it's not like Stalingrad. And for the special operations guys, it is kind of a big game hunt where occasionally the big game will turn around on you.
Okay, that's fascinating. Did you read any of the...
Just like a caveat. I've got a caveat. I saw things through a toilet paper tube. I mean, I had a very low level view of things. So it's entirely possible that people that were 20 miles away or 100 miles away got a completely different experience. Actually, I'm really sure of it.
Right.
So anybody that's listening and goes, "Hey man, that's not what I saw," that's totally possible. I can only speak about what I saw.
Right.
Right. So I guess whoever's planning your hunt, if they screw up or if they're acting on bad information, you could end up in a firefight. Nasty. So it just depends. Yeah.
Of course. It's kind of a competition there, right? Because it's a competition to see who can be dumber. And the bad guys, they're naturally talented at it, but the Americans have organization on their side. So it's kind of like when your screw-ups overlap with right. It's more organized stupidity. So when your screw-ups overlap with their stupidity, just right, then yeah.
Oh, it's terrible.
It's an interactive disaster.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you have any? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, James.
I'm really curious about the Kurds. Did you have contact with any other types of Kurds from the other religions? Because I understand that they break up at least three ways religiously. Yeah.
First of all, as somebody that sort of is read as a child of the white nationalist movement, or one of them, you must understand that the Kurds, being Aryan, are white. So obviously they're a notch above all the other. No, just kidding. I mean, they are
laughing right now.
Let's do the taxonomy. It's
finally somebody steps up and addresses the Kurdish question. The Kurds are actually, in fact, I think of the groups of people I saw in Iraq, the Yazidis were the best in terms of just basic human behavior. The Kurds were kind of behind them, and then the Arabs were. It was like a demonic parody of humanity, just every possible sphere of human activity. Like, it's not just you do it like the Kurds were kind of like, if you ever seen the movie Borat, the Kurds were in a way like that, but the Arabs were just like if I'm visiting your house and then I steal all your stuff and then I take a dump in your kitchen, like that. I'm not even. I think on this one, I can't accurately speak for everybody that's been there and dealt with them on the ground. Okay, I retract my caveat specifically here. I mean, literally, like poison your dog, eat all your food, steal everything, thumbnail down, and take a dump in your kitchen, and then smile at you and like just walk away. And it's not because you're an American, because they do it to each other too. The Kurds, you know, I mean, you've read Xenophon, right? You've read
yes,
the March to 10,000. You know, the Kardashians or whatever they were called. The Kardashians, the guys like everything was cool, you know, and they were just kind of booting everybody aside, and then they got to the mountains, and then they had problems with the Kardashians, right? That was the Kurds, and they're still like that, you know. They got Sunni Kurds and they got Shia Kurds down by the mountains that I think are east of Baghdad, and then they got in the area we were, it was the Sunni Kurds, and then they got the Yazidis, which are also kind of Kurd. They speak Kurmanji Kurdish. There's two different big dialect groupings, Kurmanji and Sorani. And the Yazidis, the first thing the Kurds did with their independence was they went and burned some of their Yazidi neighbors out, just to kind of give you a picture, because they're not Muslim.
Right.
Darius
II, he had them trained as heavy infantry to try to stand up to the Macedonian phalanx at ISIS. I can't pronounce what they were called, but it's pretty similar to their tribal name, and not too far off from Kardashian. And they were considered tough infantry troops, and the Persian Empire didn't have too many tough infantry. They mostly had good horse troops. I know Richard Burton usually went undercover as a Kurd. He claimed to be a Kurd when a Kurdish doctor, and sometimes a holy man when he went to Mecca and Herat. So it was a way for him to get away with having his eye color that he had. And Saladin was a Kurd.
Saladin was in fact a Kurd. Yeah, my guys would when we were running around, they would occasionally tell people I was from the Pamir, because they got light colored Tajiks up there. Herat, I don't think you would have had any problem, because Herat is an old Persian city. It's full of Persians. Herat, Samarkand, and I think there were two other big ones. And a lot of the Persians are in fact pretty light skinned, but I'm sure you couldn't pass for one of them because you had an accent. Whereas Kurds, I'm sure you're not going to get a lot of in Herat. Yeah.
Well, I have been guilty of going on YouTube and looking for video montages of beautiful Persian women, and half of them have lighter skin than I do.
That's because the Middle East. That's because in the Middle East, that's like a big thing. You know, women are supposed to be pale. Like that's a big standard of beauty or whatever. Yeah, there's a lot of even in the middle of Iraq, you'd see redheaded Arabs and red hair and fair skin and blue or green eyes. And of course, the guys I was with, their explanation was obviously that they must have been from the first Gulf War, because obviously how else these guys get here. And the reality is that it's a big patchwork, and there's been people from everywhere living in communities there, all over the place. You can say from the time of Alexander the Great, a lot of Europeans came there, or you can say a lot of the indigenous people. Heck, you can go to North Africa and see Berbers that are red haired or blonde haired or whatever, and light eyes. You go to Mongolia and see all these Mongols that got probably from the Taharians from 12,000 years ago or whatever, that are blonde or red haired.
So you're a big tent guy for who counts as white. I'm just joking. We don't have to do the taxonomy.
It's kind of a recent idea, right? After they got rid of monarchy, they said, okay, we'll be nationalists, and then nationalism wasn't enough, so they said, okay, we'll be racialists. Before that, I'm not sure they really thought in those categories. I don't think that they thought. I think they thought like, here's Christendom and here's the Turk or whatever, and who cares if these particular Turks look like they could be from Scandinavia because they come from the Atlas Mountains. It doesn't matter. Or who cares if these particular Christians look like all slanty-eyed and whatnot because they're Christians. So I think it's a recent development thinking like this.
I pretty much ransacked Peabody Library's whole classic selection over 3 years, and I think I only found 2 references to race in all of these history books and oratory books all the epic poems. One of them was about a group of black boxers that Caligula brought to Rome to perform, and the other one's about a hero in the Dionysica, and he's an Ethiopian. They go to Dionysus is traveling to Ethiopia on a quest in this book that was written in late antiquity. There's really no racial references. So I can find there's a lot of ethnic references to different tribes.
Sure, because that was important. That was the important thing. I mean, obviously, these people weren't idiots. You see, like Ibn Khaldun writes a lot about. Actually, got banned from Quora for quoting Ibn Khaldun, who was he was this. If anybody, I know if anybody listening doesn't know, he was kind of the father of history and economics, and he was from Tunisia. Okay, and he was a Berber, so he was an African technically. But he writes things about, sub-Saharan Africans that I just quoted from his Muqaddimah, his big work, and they banned me. Obviously, these guys knew that, there was such a thing as, these kind of people live here, those kind of people live there, and they believe they look different, they behave different, and everything else. But that wasn't their primary category, I think, in dealing with other people.
This is the quote where he speaks about their propensity to dance at inappropriate times.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dancing and how they make great slaves, and they're always happy and singing, and not very intelligent, and so on and so forth. I mean, anybody that's interested can find it.
The redheads. I know that Thracian girls were prized for their red hair in antiquity from about 200. They were dealing them a lot in Egypt. I found a fragment of a poem by Menander about this, and I know that the Russians they had a big slave trade with the Arabs and the Byzantines coming down out of Russia. I'm sure they were grabbing up a lot of Slavic girls and dispersing them to various powerful people in the Middle East and Asia and North Africa.
Oh, sure, of course.
And there was a British army, an entire British army, I think, got wiped out. And a lot of it was Indian. It was an Anglo-Indian army towards the end of World War I that actually tried marching up from Basra to Babylon, and it didn't do well. I think they pretty much got crushed.
At Kut, they crushed them.
Okay,
so Kut is the name of the place, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, there's got to be a huge amount of racial mixture there. They probably didn't kill all those guys. Some of those guys probably got divvied up and sold off, or maybe escaped. Who knows?
I don't think they would have gotten sold off, because immediately afterwards, Britain occupied Iraq, right? So I don't think anybody was keeping their pet Brit on a leash, in the backside or anything.
Although it sounds like a good idea.
Look, there's a really good. Well, they're already trained. They can already do commands and everything else.
They can make you tea.
No, look. There's a great book by a guy called Christopher Beckwith called "Empires of the Silk Road," where he just tracks the flow of people, all across Eurasia. Like the rise and fall of empires. Beckwith. He's out of the University of Indiana, Bloomington. Excellent book, phenomenal. And, he talks about how, I think was it the Abbasids or the ones after them, they basically rose to power on the back of, I think they were called the Gulam, the Turkic slave troops. So they had all these guys coming out of Khwarezm and Central Asia, the rest of Central Asia, and settling in Baghdad. They had their own quarter of Baghdad. And, so it's nothing new, and these guys were not the first to do it. People have this idea that until the railroads or whatever, or maybe a little before then, people just kind of huddled in their own little corner and that was it. But that's not true. People would travel hundreds or thousands of miles for whatever reasons, for trade, for war, for, as slaves, anything. And this was constantly ongoing all across Eurasia.
These were kind of like Babylonian Mamluk.
These guys were. It was the for the Abbasids, for the Muslims. Yeah. They were the predecessors of the Mamluks.
Okay, that's interesting. I'll have to check that book out. I just read about this tribe. I'm reading a guy named Weissman's account of Bacon's rebellion. He was sent over by the king to document it. with the troops that were finally sent to clean it up. There was a tribe called the Westos.
Of Bacon's Rebellion, you said?
Yes, in 1676 in Virginia.
Yeah.
There were 4 tribes involved in this. There was the Doegs and the Westos seemed like they were actually these hybrid patchworks of tribes that had been destroyed and runaway whites. And there was one group, the Westos, they actually relocated from the Richmond site all the way down to southern South Carolina, so they would be closer to the slaves that they wanted to abduct. They were in the business of just abducting people and selling them to the English, to the Spanish, to this tribe that lived on the island in Roanoke River where Riley is. And they migrated in 400 miles in just a couple of months, and just changed where their village was, and they didn't even have horses. They were just walking. So, I mean, that's a pretty good example of how mobile people can be before modern transportation.
Yep.
And the Susquehannocks went everywhere. There was this one group of Susquehannocks. They had 100 fighting men, 300 to 400 non-combatants, and they changed their residence from Delaware, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, North Carolina, as necessary, just to stay alive. And they might travel through half of these areas in a given year. And again, they were on foot. They only had a few horses they stole from the English.
Right on. I tried traveling long distance. I used the bicycle. I didn't walk, which was probably a mistake in retrospect. But I tried traveling long distance, and I went. In a few months, I went probably about 3,000 miles, something like that. After I got out of the Army, before I went to college. It's not, obviously on a bicycle you can cover a lot more ground. You can cover probably about 4 times the distance, in a given day. But it's nothing impossible. And a lot of places, I gotta assume that if you're just passing through and you look like you were more trouble than you were worth to kill you, rob you, take the women or whatever, then, people trade and just kind of pass you through.
Right.
No issue.
What was the span of your travels by bicycle in the U.S.?
I didn't travel in the U.S. I went from Croatia to southern Turkey and then took a boat to Israel. It was the first time I ever been to Israel.
Oh, so you're traveling across southern Europe on a bicycle.
Well,
listen, man, my regret back then, this was 2010, my regret is that I didn't go through Syria and Jordan, Turkey, Syria, and Jordan, because that was probably the last chance that, I'd have of it in my life. And back then I wasn't religious either, so, I was eating the local food or whatever, and, there was a lot less, it's different now. I was a lot more free in what I was able to do.
Is that because you're an Israeli citizen now?
No, it's because, people, you're going through and people invite you for food. I gotta explain, hey man, I can't eat the food you cook.
Right.
It's not kosher.
Yeah.
If you give me, I'll cook food in my pot or whatever, and it doesn't work the same way. Every, from Friday to Saturday, it's a completely different existence, man. It's a completely different existence. I'm part of a family. I'm part of a community now. I've got roots. Back then, it wasn't an issue.
All right.
A lot of stuff.
Responsibilities. Yeah.
What kind of buildings did you raise your building where you live in your settlement? I have no idea what kind of structures you live in. It looks like you have a hardwood ceiling.
Yeah, I'm renting a house from a guy that built it, and he built this thing out of basically it's got a frame and it's got built out of boards, I guess, inside and outside. Most people in illegal settlements live in what's called a caravan, which is basically a trailer. Back in the States, how do I explain this? Back in the States, I think the people that I felt the most comfortable with were people that were out in kind of more country out in the West, not necessarily in the South, but out in the West. And I always, my guys would make, in the military, I would occasionally make fun of this one guy that was from Missouri, that, hey, about trailer parks and so on and so forth. And he told me, listen, man, you're the product of jail time, illegal alcohol sales, and I don't remember what else. And he said, you're basically trailer trash yourself, and it's true. So here, these settlements, right? It's conversion evolution is what it's called.
Yeah.
Like you got like the dinosaur that looks like a shark, or like a dolphin. Then you got a dolphin. That's basically me with rednecks. So what you see on the hilltops a lot of times, people live in these trailers that are supposed to be temporary. They're supposed to last for like 5 years or something like that, and they're out there for like 10, 15 years raising families in them and building like ramshackle additions to them fundamentally because the government is jerking them around. So something more permanent, odds are pretty good that they'll come knock it down, or odds are half and half or whatever. And that's kind of the experience for a lot of people. I'm fortunate enough to rent a house from this cat that built it, and they haven't knocked it down. And I hope to build my own, in a year or something like that. And
what's the security situation around there besides the cats? Untouchable cats.
I don't live as a matter of principle in places that have a fence around them. So my place doesn't have a fence. We got, I think most of the guys are armed here in Israel. If you live in the settlements, it's relatively easy to get a permit, which entitles you to one pistol and 50 rounds of ammunition, which are accountable for.
Wow.
Which is a little bit different from the States. And that's it, man. I got dogs, and that's kind of the security situation. There's some soldiers in the pillbox way down the hill that I think they're on the good day they're covering about probably 400 meters all around, 300 meters all around. If somebody wants to come up here, they can. But if they want to try, let them. That's the security situation.
You said that as a matter of principle, you don't live with fences. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it's not just principle. Tactically, it's unsound. Mm. It's an unsound decision because when you put up a fence, that tells the enemy you can come right up to the fence, and nothing can be done to you. And by the way, this is all we claim of this place, and you can build actually right next to the fence because it's outside the fence. And you can go up there, and if the fence has sensors on it, you can pull on the fence and run away and see how long it takes, the security forces to react, and then do that every night for a couple of weeks until they don't react so fast anymore. You can, this actually happened to me and my wife. We were living in a place called Kiryat Arba, which does have a fence, and we were walking along the fence one night, and somebody tried to take my head off, or her head off, with a rock with a slingshot, like a professional slingshot, one of these ones that you can probably kill somebody if you nail them good. And you look out, you got like the fence is lit up. You look out, you look into the darkness, right? You can't see them. By the time the security forces get there, look around, look across the fence, then they got to go all the way around, go through the gate, and then the guy's like long gone. You can just snipe at people. It's not a problem. That's on the tactical side. On the principle side, putting a fence is putting yourself in a ghetto. It says, we only claim this part of our land, which is wrong. If we have a claim to this land, we have a claim to the whole land. You can't make a principal claim to your little ghetto and then say, well, everything outside of this is negotiable. Let them put up their fence. Let the Arabs build a fence.
So how did you? Go ahead. Yeah,
here's
please.
The thing, right? Like I live on top of a mountain. Anybody, Arabs don't come up here. Anybody that's coming up here is up to no good. And so okay, you're in play. You're up here, you're up here to either attack us or to steal something. That's fine. There's no line that you can come right up to and like waggle your tongue and maybe one day crawl across the fence. There just isn't.
All right.
If you're up on this hill, you're in play.
That's a good point. When I lived in Western Pennsylvania when I was a teenager, nobody had fences.
Right.
And I had really forgotten it until this conversation. It's very rare to find a place that's unfenced in Baltimore City or in Baltimore County. You might have front yards unfenced, but the front yards are it's like 15 feet from the sidewalk to the porch. But yeah, you have all these little hideous boxes in the back of the house. Yeah, this 18 by 30 foot yard that's fenced in. It's really, I guess it resembles a cage or a pen more than anything.
Right.
And they're expensive.
Well, at least, like your local Bindu population can't hop a fence or anything. That's just way. Or excuse me, it's more symbolic than anything else, right? They go, well, that's private property back there. I better keep going. Been walking around for 6 weeks looking for something to steal, but everybody's got these fences. What am I going to do?
Well, somebody around the corner from me just put up this really nice looking stockade fence, which I thought was just a huge blunder because it's only 6 feet high. Any healthy male could climb it, and it completely blocks the view of whatever anybody entering the yard is doing from the street side. So a cop could be driving by. He couldn't see somebody kicking in the basement door.
Exactly,
and maybe not hear him because it actually blocks the sound too. In Afghanistan, what we had, we did have a fence. In Afghanistan, everybody lives in a compound, and these compounds have these mud walls that are about, 12 feet high, something like that. I've got a kind of a funny story about that. If you want, I'll tell you about the time that I had to deal with a sort of a mob situation.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
I was trying to say that one of the good ideas that I saw, these guys had razor wire, but they didn't have this razor wire on top of the fence. No, they had the razor wire on the inside, about a foot down. Okay,
oh, man.
Hanging up. So when you hop that fence, and you didn't do like an Olympic style vault off all 10 or 12 feet, you'd be in the wire. And assuming you did hop over the wire, or you did the smart thing and drug a mattress up there with you, then the dogs would get you. And if the dogs didn't get you, then the security guards would be on you. So I can get behind
cheese
that.
Grater.
Nah, it's not that bad. And I used to be started off in the military as a combat engineer, and you're playing that stuff all the time. It's like confetti your pants or whatever. It's
okay.
It cuts. You get it can cut all the way through your skin, but it's not gonna. If you fall in there, you're thrashing around. Yeah, it's gonna be. You're in for a shitty day. Also, I'm sure you look stupid, hanging up there crying and bleeding. I mean, the infantry guys, what they would do is they would do like something called a body breach, which is the stupidest thing I ever heard. They would take their youngest private in the squad and throw him on it, and then everybody would run across there and try to peel him off from the other side. But that's assuming you got single strand concertina. If you got triple strand, that's going to be a little more difficult, both to run over and to peel them off. Anyway, not important. So okay, I'll tell you guys a funny story, right? So I came in there, and I wasn't really dealing with payroll, and the head guy, who was an Afghan who was dealing with payroll, he got recalled to Singapore for I think a week or several days, and this was right around Ramadan. So he gets called back to Singapore, which is where the company was based out of. And he goes, hey, man, have fun, you're in charge. And I said, okay, cool, no problem. That was sort of my default answer to everything, like British style, you get some 20-year-old idiot, out of their public school, gets sent off, and he's like, oh, okay, you're great, you're the district chief, have at it, buddy. And you just got to, stiff upper lip, and yeah, sure, no problem, I got it. I'm sitting there, signing papers, and I'm feeling pretty good. Probably about 5 hours a day go by, and my site manager shows up and he goes, hey, man, the workers are here to see you. And I go, what workers? He goes, the workers that are building our project in the city. I said, well, what are they here to see me about? He said, they haven't been paid in 2 months, and it's Ramadan, They're very upset. These are guys that are making $6 a day to basically swing a pickaxe or whatever. It's not like they're just gonna go and no problem. I'm gonna go in the bank account, maybe put it on the card or whatever. Take out a second mortgage on the Bud Hut. Oh, okay, this is exciting. So I had, I have a 9mm that, I kind of kept tucked away, and I go outside and we had this, the walls, and then we had this big metal gate that it would like open. You could drive in there and close behind you. And there was a gap of probably about 6 inches between the gate and the ground. And all I saw was just bare feet, just packing there. I said, how many of them are there? He goes, I don't know, like 300, something like that. Well, I mean, I knew how many were out there. I knew there were 300 working on this project. I was just wondering if all of them had showed up, and, to my luck, they had. So I'm like, okay, well, hey, you come here, you can translate, my Dari just wasn't good enough to have a labor dispute, with these guys with. So I went and I told them to close the gate behind me, and me and this cat came out there, and these guys stopped yelling when they saw me. They were shocked. They weren't expecting my face. I said, what's up? They said, we haven't been paid. I go, okay, I understand you haven't been paid. Who's in charge? And so they they weren't expecting that. So they pushed like 6 guys forward. And then I made a very stupid mistake. I said, and because they calmed down, I thought, okay, I can have this conversation here, and then, they'll understand, they'll leave. Kind of squatted down this. I said, listen, guys, I understand you haven't been paid. This is the first I've heard of it, but you're going to get paid tomorrow. And then they went crazy because they've been hearing that for 2 months. So I said, okay, you 6 guys that are in charge, get inside. I'm going to talk to you. You guys wait out here. And before they, got a good mob thing going together, I kind of pushed a couple of these guys inside. The other ones, pushed in there. And then, the security guys, the Afghan security guys, kind of squeezed this gate closed. There was a little door in this big, massive gate, which is what I squeezed out of and squeezed back into. And then I took these guys inside and basically had this like extended, conversation with them until the head engineer showed up. And he'd been out on the job site. This guy was about 65 years old and very well respected locally. And when he basically told these guys, the man told you, he's going to pay you tomorrow. Shut up and get out of here. And these guys left. And I did manage to get everybody paid off the next day and raised a big stink about it and got, we just, there was some kind of hold up. We hadn't gotten the money from Kabul in 2 months. So these guys were, eating it as a result. Anyway, I'm just always going to remember that, walking outside and just seeing, like 20 feet of vehicle gate and just feet, brown feet everywhere. And it's going, oh shit, this is going to be shit. I'm going to get killed by these guys over,
The paymaster left you with that when he went off to Singapore and didn't tell you about it?
It wasn't the paymaster. He was the district manager.
Oh, okay.
The paymaster was Indonesian. I called him in. I was like, why the hell didn't you tell me about it? He just had this like big like Indonesian grin. Like I thought it, like, hey, it worked out, didn't it? Get out of here, man. I didn't talk to that guy again until I think we fired him pretty soon afterwards.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't his fault, he had all his ledgers balanced. From his perspective, everything was cool.
Yeah, he had to go out there and talk to the guys, so that was really cool.
Well, exactly. Literally, like this is like one of those like classic, like nobody wanted it to happen. It just ended up happening. We just wanted to talk. We don't know who was the first guy that threw the first stone. But then I don't know what happened. You know what I mean? Like it was like one of these classic like third world riot scenes, like in the making.
Oh, glad you made it through that.
Yeah.
Oh, that. Yeah, I've never had to deal with
like
that with 6 dudes.
It was like my life is basically Forrest Gump in many ways, and that was just kind of one of the Forrest Gump episodes. Mine is a celebrity.
Yeah, you rode your bike instead of running. That's good.
Yeah,
you had that chapter. Well, I wanted to ask you if you want to comment on the situation with ISIS right now, because that's changed a lot, or maybe you can tell us your perspective if it really has changed a lot.
Well, I mean, I don't know. The big picture is that I think ISIS really, I read, if you guys know who Syed Qutb is, he's one of the founders of the Muslim Brotherhood. I read his books when I was in Iraq the first time to kind of try to understand what's the Sunni perspective, which I guess the jihadist perspective. Although that term is kind of it's a bullshit term, because basically, you know, the standard outlook is that things right now are not as they should be in the Sunni Muslim world, which it doesn't take a genius to figure that one out. And the solution is that you should return to the state of things as they were back when Muhammad and his companions were running things, or the guys immediately after him. Although I think like his first four heirs, the first four caliphs, or however you say the plural in Arabic, they all got killed. So apparently, even, you know, under Muhammad's companions, things were not all that ideal. But that's their ideal. And the way they're going to get that is basically through conquest. I mean, that's pretty non-controversial, right? That's the way Islam spread historically for the first, you know, in the Golden Age. I mean, eventually through merchants and everything else, and they'll tell you a lot of it happened peacefully and so on and so forth. But the bottom line is, you know, if you got infidels around, you know, like they gotta convert, or you gotta kill them. And if they're Christians or Jews, then they gotta you know, occupy a subordinate status, or you gotta kill them, or they gotta convert. Right. And so I don't think ISIS was really anything exceptional in its, you know, theoretic. I mean, all that they did was they actually implemented the rule book. And because America was run by, I guess, President Frosty Latte, and, you know, his wacky affirmative action crew, you know, the head of the CIA, Brennan, was a Muslim.
Yeah.
You know, which
I think the CIA angle is important, because people seem to forget that Trump killed a CIA program, I think in July or August this year, that was funding the ISIS and the arming them in Syria.
No. I'm sorry. No. All that was completely legitimate. See, what they were doing is they were arming the peaceful, democratic Muslim
I'm sorry.
And then accidentally, the weapons every month would end up in the hands of the violent and non-democratic.
What a bummer.
Islamic State, right? Like it was. I mean, like that. I mean, you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs, I guess. And then, you know, and despite the best efforts of America to, you know, crush these guys, they're just too, I guess, cunning and dedicated and wily. And, you know, anyway, you know, basically the bottom line is these guys are, you know, what happened was something similar to what happened with Iraq in 2007. Which is that, you know, 2005, 2006, these guys took over Anbar and big swaths of western Iraq, and the American military more or less pulled out or fell back to a few big bases, and you know, occasionally would do like their big mule deer hunt, and then in 2006, 2007, they really ratcheted up their efforts. And the locals also kind of got sick of it, because it's one thing to sympathize with these guys and their theoretical aims, and another thing to be actually ruled by them, because they're not very efficient at administering stuff. And, you know, a lot of these guys are just kind of the trash of, you know, the French Muslim ghettos, or, you know, the European Muslim ghettos or whatever. They're not like, you know, I mean, in theory, they're very proper and upstanding, and I guess many of them probably are, you know, have a bunch of integrity, but a lot of them are just thugs, you know. And so
are a lot of them from Europe, from the Muslim ghettos in Europe?
Oh, a ton of them. The most active guys came from the Muslim ghettos of Europe, Chechnya, you know, Chechnya also, but a lot of them came from France, from Belgium, from England. You know, there was. I mean, it was really an international movement. Again, if you're a Sunni Muslim and you really believe in the doctrine, for me, I find it difficult to understand how. I mean, the same way to compare without too much of a close comparison, I don't understand how, as a Jew, you can be a religious Jew and be content living outside of Israel. By the same token, I don't understand, as a Muslim, if, you know, you got the Islamic State, or, you know, the Nusra group or whatever, how you can live in France or England and not at least want to support them monetarily or somehow.
Yeah.
Because these guys are actually saying, listen, we want to build a state that's run according to Islamic principles.
Well,
they're not in it for the money or whatever.
Yeah. Can you talk about Saudi Arabia influence? I think something is going on, right? I don't follow very closely, but I know that in Saudi Arabia they have been like arresting a bunch of members of the royal family. And then I think that Saudi Arabia and Israel are like have long time been kind of secret allies, right? And maybe that's kind of coming out more into the public. And then there's the Jerusalem embassy for the United States. Do you have any clarification you can give? Any view on that?
I can only speculate. I don't have obviously any deep insider knowledge. Something big is going on in Saudi, and also something big is going on across the Muslim world. What exactly it is, I don't know. I think it has something to do with President Trump going over there and him and Saudi King doing that weird thing with the glowing orb.
The glowing orb, yeah.
Well, I don't have any insight in that. What I will tell you, like the big picture is like this, from my perspective. There's been several major ideologies that, one way or the other, sprung from Judaism, whether directly or indirectly. And they've been, over the last probably 30 years, they've been going bankrupt one after the other. And I think Islam, especially Sunni Islam, for many people it's becoming obvious that it's a bankrupt ideology, just like communism, just like Christianity in a way. And, and I want to believe that many of them, I'm actually working as a side project on something that's mapping the descendants of the lost tribes of Israel and also Jewish communities that became, that converted to Christianity or to Islam over the centuries. And so I'm talking to people all over the world. I know that many people are, and I want to believe that more people are starting to say, okay, look, this isn't working. Communism isn't working. Capitalism isn't working. I mean, as an ideology, not as a way of organizing, the rules of who gets to dispose of their property, how. Well, what do we do now? And I'm hoping that the leadership of Saudi Arabia is moving along those lines.
Do you think that, because they're the ones that have been promulgating Wahhabism that, I know if you look through history, right, Islam kind of follows the same course always of conquest and expansion, but at least in our era, it seems like it's the Wahhabi school that's behind a lot of the recent, last 20 years. So if they're, maybe they're move away from that, and I don't know. I mean, first of all, there's a difference between Wahhabi and Salafi. Don't ask me to expand because I'm not really. But look, it doesn't matter. Wahhabi, Salafi, mainstream Islam, Shia, Sufis. It's all based on the same basic doctrine, and it all turns into the same thing. A lot of the guys fighting the Russians across the Caucasus were Sufis. Sufis get portrayed as these like happy hippie, tripping out and meditating.
Yeah, man, just love, dude, just love, bro. Well, guess what? The Chechens have historically been Sufi. Okay,
the Chechens are Sufi.
Historically, they've been Sufi. Now they've got a bunch of Wahhabi stuff going on there. So,
but they've always been warlike in their history, right? So Chechens have.
Yeah, but I mean, that's also how you survive. If you live up in the mountains in the Caucasus, it's not like a shortage of people that have designs on you. I think the fall of the Islamic State as a state is really crushing. A lot of people went, okay, right, this is the prophecy. This is the end time. We're going to have our big apocalyptic battle. Jesus is going to come back. That was part of the prophecy too. And the Mahdi and everything else and all this stuff is going to happen. It's on. And then it kind of turned into a big wet fart. Okay, so what now? Right? Well, I mean, it did. It was obvious that if you applied any sort of like organized military force to these guys, they're out in the desert. They're regularly armed. They've got a bunch of heavy equipment that maybe they looted from the heroic Iraqi army when I think like 300 of them routed the Iraqi army in Mosul and like sent 2 divisions just scurrying away and took all their nice American equipment. But all that stuff only really works when it's got American logistics behind it. Yeah. It was on the end of a giant supply pipeline and everything else.
Right.
So, it was obvious they couldn't stand up to any kind of even the most minimal conventional effort applied to them. But these guys really believed, okay, so what now? Do we just regroup and try again? Well, in 2007, 2008, that was the answer. But they hadn't really declared a state then, or, they hadn't declared a caliphate back then. Now what? So they need to decide what they're going to do. Personally, I don't think there's an answer besides monotheism, and I don't think there's a monotheistic answer besides the one we've got. I think making a cheap copy of it and putting a crescent on it and going, okay, actually it's ours now, or even a cross, I don't think it's proven satisfactory. I think the next step is that there will be a movement towards, how do I explain this? I think there'll be a movement towards the people of Israel accepting their role as promised in the Torah, which is to say, the promise that God makes to Abraham, He makes the covenant with him, is that I will make of you a holy, not just, not just, Goy Kadosh Mamlechet Kohanim, a holy nation and a kingdom of priests. Meaning that, that the Jewish people are supposed to, and obviously we're not there right now, but we're supposed to be the way that the other nations of the world connect to God. Not that, we're sitting there, and everybody's crawling around, as our slaves and we're the global overseer. But, just like we have a temple and that's the site, this is kind of the conduit. That's the way it's supposed to be.
Can you tell about how you experienced your religious awakening?
I just saw. I think it's kind of a micro model of the way that the rest of the world will as well. I saw that the other stuff was completely bankrupt. I saw. How do I explain this? I mean, I saw Islam pretty up close and personal, and I saw that. Then I came back to the States, and I obviously saw all the flaws of Islam, but I saw that what the States had was in many crucial ways worse. Because that level of just alienation and degradation, and basically like any normal human drive. Look, the Jewish perspective is that every normal human drive you can think of is there for a reason and should be channeled to serve God, right? Like food, exists, and you there's a certain way you eat it, and there's a blessing you say, and you use the food to connect to God. You have a sexual drive, and there's a way to channel that to in the family, and so on and so forth, and everything else. What I saw was that in the West, every one of those drives had basically teams of guys with PhDs and MBAs from the Ivy Leagues figuring out a way, 50 hours a week, how to use that to hook you to make you their slave.
Yeah.
Whether food, sex, or anything you can think of, and have it lead to your destruction. I was thinking about this. James talks a lot about the God of things. Actually, okay, I'll take a step back. Right, there was Marcus Aurelius, right, the Stoic emperor.
Yes.
We have a tradition that he secretly converted to Judaism, but he wasn't. He obviously, due to his position, wasn't able to say that to make it public. But that's neither here nor there. We do know that a lot of people around that period and the Roman elite were converting to Judaism either in secret or outright. But anyway, Marcus Aurelius has his book, Meditations. And I read the Meditations because I understood kind of the bankruptcy of the Western way of life and the way of building society. And I thought, okay, Stoicism is supposed to have answers to this because the Roman Empire went down this road. And I saw that the Stoic answer is in a way, it's the Buddhist answer, right? You disengage yourself, you abstract yourself from all these drives and, like Seneca or Marcus Aurelius, you go, well, I don't care, I never owned anything in this world, really, so who cares? Anything I get is basically a freebie. I'll be happy about it, and if I have nothing, then, kind of looks like Diogenes Laertes, right, that lived in a barrel.
Yeah.
You know the story, right?
Go ahead, tell it.
He was a cynic, right? A cynic from the Greek word, James, right from the Greek word for dog.
Dog.
Yeah. So he was a guy that he didn't want to be the slave of anybody or any passion, so he basically lived like a feral dog. And he lived in a barrel. I assume it was a large barrel. Alexander the Great came to visit him when he conquered his town, and he stood there and he said, listen, I've heard you're this great, wonderful philosopher. Is there anything I can do for you? And Diogenes looked up at him and he said, well, you're standing in the sunlight. You're blocking the sunlight. Can you move?
There's another story I found in Pausanias about Diogenes the Cynic. He was called upon to make a speech at the Pythian Games. It was either the Pythian Games or the Isthmian Games. I think it was the Isthmian Games around at Corinth. And he just went up in front of everybody and publicly defecated. And that was, and he walked away. He didn't say anything.
He was a performance artist.
I'm wondering about
today could be in MoMA.
There's something we discussed in print before. It was after I read one book, White Gold, and then I read Thomas Pillow's own account. The problem was sultanates. The problem with the fact that the sultan, the military leader, really doesn't have legitimate authority. And these are the guys that end up ruling everything in Islam. Right. And they use a lot of interlopers to prop them up, people from outside and slaves and so forth. Could you talk about that a little bit? Because you did some good reading on that. It's kind of like the opposite of divine right. The sultan's just a military.
Right. I've got a caveat. Okay. I didn't answer properly. The reason I brought up the Stoics is that I saw that this is not. I can be a Stoic. I cannot raise a Stoic family.
Right.
You cannot build a Stoic society. You can't have a city of Stoics. You know, you can have Diogenes up there. You know, making his speech. But if the whole stadium is using this mode of communication, you know, your Olympic Games aren't very good, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to go anyway.
I think
not
it's
much
the
for sanitation contractor.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
To me, it's like the codification or the spiritualization of the alienation. Like if this is the way we're going to be, then this is a way that we can at least gain some spiritual connection from it, right? You don't get
right, but it's a negative.
It is, because you don't have a family or a community or roots, but whatever you don't have becomes your spiritual practice.
Well, for me, the Stoic is the counterpart in the primitive world of the shaman, who's usually somebody that doesn't reproduce, doesn't have a family, is some kind of oddball and serves an advisory capacity, not somebody that can be the center. You can't have a community of people like that.
Right. And I think what really Judaism is integrated, meaning you don't have that. Well, you know, this guy. Sorry, I need to make my daughter a bottle. So if you guys hear some running water, that's what it is. Lynn, if you want to cut this part out.
The audience loves this stuff. They love it.
Yeah.
They do.
So what was the question that I ducked out of?
We discussed it in print before.
The legitimacy.
The sultanate, the problem with the legitimacy.
Yeah. Right. So the Muslims basically have something like a knockoff of our system, where, you know, the king is supposed to be from the Davidic line, okay, and he's supposed to meet several qualifications, and there's supposed to be the high court that's supposed to anoint him, and then, you know, his kids from then on, you know, don't need the same thing. But anyway, there's a set of rules and procedures that there's a set of qualifications you gotta meet to be a king. And you can sort of be a king from the non-Davidic line, but it's understood that eventually, one way or the other, the crown will fall from the hands of your descendants. Whereas when the Davidic line is restored, that's it. It's forever.
So if he's not from the Davidic line, he's like a Lord Protector or something like that, waiting for the line to reassert itself.
If he's not from the Davidic line, I'm talking here. You know, the scholar that writes most about this is Maimonides, that has this all very systematically laid out, and it's available in English translation online. It's called the Mishneh Torah. It's really, you know, I mean, it's all of the laws, and one of the books in this compendium is the laws of kings and wars, which is not a very long book, and it very comprehensively lays out the framework. So, you know, a king can arise, you know, a guy can arise tomorrow and say, hey, listen, I'm the king of Israel, and the people can say, okay, you're the king of Israel, and he's not from the Davidic line, and yet he does all the stuff a king is supposed to do, and he's legitimate. But it's understood that eventually the crown will fall from the hands of his descendants, one way or the other. Maybe he won't have male descendants, maybe this, maybe that, I don't know. So they've got, many things in Islam are, a parallel or a knockoff, to call things what they are, of Judaism.
I got that from reading the Quran, particularly the tales of Moses that I found in the Quran. It really, that's the impression I got.
Yeah. So here also. So in Sunni Islam, I think in I believe, which one of them, I'm obviously I'm not an Islamic scholar. One of them, both of them, there's a caliph, right? And he's like the legitimate caliph. That's it. One of them, he has to be the descendant of Muhammad, which really isn't that hard. There's a ton of them. And the other one, he does not, or he has to be a descendant of the other line or whatever. But the reality is that every time that they stood up a caliphate, first of all, these guys would start killing each other. Surprise, surprise. And then the caliphate would become corrupt. And what would happen would be that the caliph would end up being this ineffectual, little pasty guy sitting in this castle, enjoying his decadent pleasures, and the guy that would be running things would be the Amir, the guy like his minister of defense, or minister of offense, I guess.
Yeah, it's like the Turkish Grand Vizier.
Right. And officially on paper, this guy would say, no, listen, I'm just the local ruler. Of course, I completely, I subjugate myself to the authority of the caliph, if there's a caliph, or, hey, I'm just filling in until a caliph arises. I'm just standing in. And that was it. That was fine. Everything was great, except for the problem is that you don't really have any standing. Okay, fine. You're an Emir. I'm an Emir too. You're an Emir of this city. I'm an Emir of that city. And we have a disagreement. Who's gonna decide between us? The ulema. Well, the ulema, they're spread and they've got different opinions and so on and so forth. And maybe many of them don't express an opinion, and we can go and bang it out. And so there's inherently no such thing as legitimacy. I mean, Abu Omar al-Baghdadi was the first guy in many centuries to stand up and go, yeah, I'm the caliph, and people started recognizing him as the caliph, which was why he was such a big deal, But historically, it's just been these guys, sultans and emirs, and there's probably like 5 other different titles, and there's like fighting it out, and there's no inherent reason that any one of them would be more or less legitimate than anybody else.
So, and this ends up leading functionally to sultans taking people with even less standing than themselves and using them to enforce their power, like the Christian slaves, like Pello, and probably eventually British military advisors, French military advisors, maybe. It seems like it left them open to colonialism in a creeping way.
It's a very good point.
The Khedive of Egypt ended up, I don't know if he took the job or not, but General Pickett, who and all of his men got slaughtered, he remained famous for his bravery. The Khedive of Egypt wanted to hire him as the commander of his guard. And so they were even in the mid-1800s looking for American and British military officers for their local armies and everything. And I just remember reading Thomas Pello's account of being in Morocco for, I think he was 25 years there, that many of the officers, they used all sub-Saharan Africans as their prison guards and their assassins. They used like a British butcher for their headsman, and they used the most intelligent of the Christian captives as officers for their soldiers, and they would go out and beat up on the tribal guys in the Atlas Mountains with essentially all these Christian slave soldiers. And then they had their army of African
soldiers. Right, I've got the book sitting on my shelf.
Yeah,
I've got the book sitting on my shelf. I bought it based on your recommendation.
It was pretty amazing when the Sultan talked about the nation being a bag of rats. You got to shake up the bag of rats or else they'll chew a hole through it.
Right.
So he's always
I mean, it's just not a recipe for stability. When you go, hey, we tortured you into converting to Islam 2 years ago, but you're the most loyal thing we got. How did Khedive get a job anyway? The Khedive was some Albanian or whatever that they said, okay, listen, you're going to be in charge of Egypt. Then the guy or his descendant goes, yeah, actually, I am going to be in charge of Egypt. Thank you very much. No, I mean, of course, yeah, we nominally pay obeisance to Istanbul, but you guys better not test that theory too hard. You might not like the results, right? Like, what's a Khedi? Well, where does that come from? Well, that's where it comes from, right? So, if they kept going, if they brought in, Pickett, Pickett could have been the Khedi, right?
Right. And the idea is to bring in officers that didn't have any local family support. They're outsiders. And this was a huge amount of adventure yarns in the 20s and 30s were written from like that European perspective of like the one white guy commanding the colored troops in this colored country.
Sure. The Germans had the same thing, Liman Pasha in World War One, right? They had like Turkish armies officered by Germans, or staffed by Germans anyway. But if you brought those guys in, okay, you bring them in, but now you got to bring more of them in, and now they start converting to Islam, and now they got their own little gangs, and pretty soon they'll kill you. I read this book called "The Crusades Through Arab Eyes" by a guy named, I think, Amin Ma'alouf was the guy's name, a Lebanese dude. And he brings a bunch of sources for what the Crusades were like through Arab eyes. And of course, it's the standard Arab line of like how bad the Crusaders were and how wonderful and nice, the Arabs were. But, he's still basically a truthful historian. And you see that constantly what's going on is these guys, officers or their chief of staff or whatever, goes, okay, actually, since I'm running this thing now for you, obviously you're not confident enough to run it yourself. Why do I even need to deal with you? See, that's something interesting. We last week's and this week's Torah portion deals with Joseph in Egypt, and the story, right? Joseph gets brought down as a slave, so I guess this predates Islam to a large degree. And the Pharaoh, he's brought down as a slave. He gets framed for attempting to rape his master's wife. He gets thrown in jail by his master, who I guess kind of knew what his wife was, but he just wanted to save face. He understood what the story was, and he was not happy with the fact that his wife was trying to seduce this guy, and then so on. He gets thrown in jail, and he's got a gift for interpreting people's dreams and predicting the future. And because of his vision, he gets put in charge of Egypt. Now Egypt has a pharaoh, right? And the pharaoh tells Joseph, okay, you're going to run everything here. You've got my full authority. Whatever you say goes. Go with it. The pharaoh can do that, because he's the pharaoh and Joseph is the Hebrew, and Joseph is not going to go and take over. But the Islamic world, the pharaoh. There's no pharaoh. It's just some guy. I can be some guy. I am some guy. Why not? And so it's like the communists or anything else. They're constantly killing each other because power is just out. Is within the grasp of anybody can grab it.
Right, without any organic support. Then it's just power, and the power will switch, and then who's up there will switch. And they're through the illegitimacy of the system, they're inviting it in.
Right.
They're inviting this.
In America, it's the same idea, but even worse, right?
Yeah, explain.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, of course. Well, they're not even interlopers. They're contractors that just take over the business. In America, it's even worse because in America you've got like the ineffectual caliph, who's like sitting in his palace. Only you've got, it's not even one guy, and you've got the guys that are actually running the thing. But again, it's not a guy. It's this first institution. So it's like that. There's no such thing as really as legitimacy. I mean, who really thinks that like these schmucks and senators and whatnot that they're running things? I mean, you can look at these people just physiognomically. You can see they're not qualified to run an ice cream stand. But somebody's running it. Right.
Well, and it's the great, since the King of New York got in there and he found out that this guy is used to running stuff, and then he can't because has he gotten anything passed?
No major legislation, but
the whole government's arrayed against him, basically.
Yeah.
And by his track record that he knows how to run stuff. He could run the lemonade stand, unlike the evil monkey before him, what the Chinese called him. I forget what the Chinese called him. Where?
Frothy latte, man.
Frothy latte.
The King of New York, man. I'm proud of that. I think I'm the to pat myself on the back a bit. I think I'm the first guy to have made that connection that Trump was basically Chris walking in the King of New York in a sense.
As far as I know, you
look,
are.
You know, I don't.
I heard it first.
Yeah.
I don't know if you, James, do you subscribe to the 5D chess theory?
Which theory?
That Trump, 3D chess.
Oh.
That Trump has it all figured out and has from the beginning. He's, playing all these guys.
No, I think Trump works on instinct, and he has good instinct, but I don't buy that.
No, I think my idea of Trump is this. We were at a family get-together. My son had some of his friends there. There's this kid from Trinidad and Tobago that's brilliant. He's some kind of engineer, and he's very arrogant. He's walking by, and he sees us playing this Scrabble game, and he takes a glance at it, and there's only 3 people playing it. And just at a glance, he says to himself, I could win that. And he sits down, and he wins the game. And I think that's what it was with Trump and the presidency. He's like, I could win that. I just think it's that simple.
I think what happened was, like, if you accidentally you've got a WWF match going on, right? Everybody's really on the same team, and then you drop like James LaFond with like a filleting knife in there, and all of a sudden.
You mean I wasn't supposed to kill all these guys? That's
what I'm sorry.
Well, now it's a crime, right? I thought it was real.
So what happens now? Like the promoter, like the promoter's like, well, what do we do now? These people are paid for the ticket. They don't really understand that this match has just taken a very unexpected turn. What do we do now?
The WWE thing, yeah, that's. I think that's the best analogy I've heard so far.
Yeah, it's good because it's just perfect.
Yeah, but now nobody knows what's going to happen now, right? Like, I mean, I thought yeah.
Grabbing politics, but it's virgin territory if it could possibly be virgin.
Well, I see it as like the opposite. Like it's all going to get burned down. I mean, I know what you mean by virgin, but I think Trump, he's in there because people wanted to see the whole thing burned down. That's what I wanted. I wanted to see Jeb Bush and Hillary Clinton lose and bring shame on their families, and Trump to go.
What shame?
Yeah.
That's very old world of you.
Come on, that's like looking at a tapeworm and going like, "Aren't you ashamed of what you're doing? That's disgusting." Look at you. This thing's like, I don't need to have eyes. What do you want from me? This is what I do. Look, if you really wanted to see it all burned down, you should have voted for Hillary.
Oh no.
I think
that's what I was hoping was going to win.
Oh yeah.
I was back.
I know you were.
Working queen? I mean,
because you thought it was going to be some kind of like social naked mole rat hide situation going on.
My science fiction novels would have come true. I could have said, I was the prophet.
Yeah. What with the vampire squid thing? Where the whole world is just run by these evil genetically engineered bitch assassins, No, it's not like that. These people are nowhere near that cool.
Yeah, they're just bureaucrats.
Come on,
they're boring and they want.
There might be something. Even the evil stuff they do is like I don't know how much the one thing that keeps me from like believing that Pizzagate is real or mostly real, because there's definitely some kind of smoke, there's some kind of fire, and nobody like normal has that kind of art just hanging around their house showing off to their guests.
That's so disgusting. That
one Serbian girl's artwork was really kind of what brought it for me. I was like, okay, like nobody, I've seen my fair share of avant-garde garbage, growing up in New York, but that, like, anybody that has that on their wall, that's like, if Jeffrey Dahmer was a billionaire, that's the stuff he'd hang up on the wall and show it to his guests and giggle.
one of those sculptures, I think, was like a sculpture of the victim of Jeffrey Dahmer.
Mm-hmm. Hysteria, it was called. Hysteria, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And Dahmer did have some sort of strange DC connection where he, on the spur of the moment, arranged a White House tour for his school group when they were all visiting there. And he was a high schooler. But that's tangential, neither here nor there. Look, even if that stuff was true, even if they were doing all that satanic, horrifying stuff, they'd be doing it in the most bureaucratic, boring way possible. It would be like an episode of Seinfeld if Seinfeld was a Satanist.
Oh man. Well, what I noticed about the video that we covered on Joe Biden last week was that of all the people, some of them is kind of, sorry, my kid is screaming. Jeff Sessions seemed to look at the way he looked at Joe Biden. It was like,
I think he actually flipped his hand off.
It was like he knew what was going on,
Well, I mean, let's just assume. My problem is that, I was in Iraq and I was like, man, these terrorists suck. They should have hired me. I would have done this so much better. There's so many ways you could have. I can't. I'm sure James you'd be like ineptly like stalked by these morons.
Right, Abbott Costello in blackface, right?
Want to just like take the knife away from them and show them how to stick yourself up, like how you do it, right? You clown. So I feel like I'm watching my border collie attempting to stop the cat. Like, ugh, you're bad at this. Stop it. So these guys, like, okay, let's just theoretically assume. Let's assume that I was a Satanist in the highest echelons of power, okay? And, like, with the inverted cross and all the candles and blah, 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 and whatever the soundtrack is, I don't know. Probably some awful thing Aleister Crowley wrote or Anton LaVey. Fine, great, wonderful, vast underground grottos, candlelight, human sacrifices, etc., so forth, okay? Why are you up there on C-SPAN trying to cop a feel of some 11-year-old daughter of some boring politician? Really? I mean, really,
yeah,
dude.
It's to rub it in everyone's faces.
I mean, I guess he does have that kind of like that kind of like smug, like smirk kind of thing. But I mean, it's just squalid. It's like a dead dog in the living room. It's just, come on. Where's the sweeping dark majesty?
All right.
You're like a little grinning lecher rubbing his hands together. Yeah, like, come on, Uncle Joe, you can do better. That's like it's not. What I'm saying is, like, I can picture the guys from Skull and Bones, Avril Harriman, all those other guys really doing it upright.
Right.
These guys,
ritual.
Man, it's yeah, just long lines, like New England Brahmin faces with like sunken eyes with evil like glimmering, like that kind of thing. This is just squalid, man. This is just pathetic. This is like history repeating itself as farce. And that's what's so disappointing about our modern era. These people are midgets, man. If you ever read Nietzsche about the last men, how like people will just kind of shrink it,
just crawl away.
Yeah, that's hopping around like fleas, man. That's what these guys are.
Yeah, I agree. If you compare them to the evil people that went before them, they don't amount to much, and probably dying from a Viagra overdose is going to be all they're going to manage at one of these satanic orgies.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. I mean, I'm kind of glad of it because it gives guys like you and me breathing room. I don't want to be I mean, we're doing a podcast with dissenting views. Come on, can you imagine this? Like we'd be up there. I'd be mining for coal on the North Slope, and James, he'd be an invalid, like sharpening shanks and fellas his cigars.
Yeah, that's right. I'd crawl around on a skateboard and I'd be sharpening toothbrushes.
skateboard. You're pretty optimistic there. How are you going to get a skateboard from the gulag? You're gonna have to leave, like, you're gonna have to like pee on a plank or something that you stole somewhere and let it freeze over so you can skate along on the frozen floor. That's like, you know, whoa there, high roller skateboard. Come on. I'd just be with the wheelbarrow probably. You know.
I hate to tell you guys, but we've been chatting.
What's that?
We've been chatting for a long time and having a lot of fun, but I'm going to have to call time here for us. And thanks a lot for joining us, Baruch. It was really, really good to have you on. Maybe we can do this again.
I'm always happy. I want to throw in one minor caveat.
Yeah.
Today is the 7th day of Hanukkah, which is, it's our celebration of when we took the empire that Alexander the Great's successors had and basically broke it in half with a bunch of, more or less shanks, the equivalent of that.
Nice.
And so, what's that?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
so for anybody that is relevant, happy Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah, Baruch. Thanks for talking to us.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, man.
All right, guys. Have a good one.
All right.
Take care, man.
We'll meet again under the sun. Every 12 minutes and another one's gone. This meat's in your makeup, this flesh is on your lips. As a nuclear warhead explodes in